Have you ever wondered why your sales team is stuck at the same cash collection number every single month, even though you keep investing on more sales coaching, you keep recruiting more talent that's supposed to blow everyone else out of the water, yet nothing actually works for you? 3 years ago, I was leading a team that was doing about $350K in cash collection every single month. And for the life of me, I could not get that company to go past $1 million a month. Now, looking back, I now realize that the reason why that was is because I just simply put didn't have the right skill set, structure, and systems to be able to grow a team. Now, fast forward a few years later, I've scaled the team all the way up to $3.5 million a month in total revenue. And what I've come to realize is that the number one reason why most sales teams get stuck and never get past above $1 million a month is because they have an inability to utilize majority of their leads. It doesn't mean that you have to go and close more of your leads or get more of your leads to show. It just simply put means getting more of your leads at the top of the funnel into the sales call. Majority of the sales teams out there do not even get to contact majority of their leads, let alone speak to them. So today, I'll show you exactly the strategies that I use to scale a team to $3.5 million a month without increasing the ad spend and without increasing the lead flow. Just for some context, my name is Mike Fars. I've been in high ticket sales for over 4 years now, done over $10 million in cash collection as a sales rep. I've done over $50K a month in straight commissions, and then went on to do over $30 million under management as a sales manager, VP of sales, and director of sales. I was the #1 front-end salesperson for the biggest sales training company in the world called 7th Level, where I then went on to become their director of sales, leading the team all the way to $3.5 million a month. And today, I'm going to show you the strategies that I use so you can apply it to your team. So with that being said, let's get into the video. All right, let's dive in. 1 million a month plus sales team. This is a repeated pattern that you probably see in all of my videos, is that the first thing whenever you're scaling a sales team or whenever you take over a sales department, the first thing you need to do is actually identify the target. A target, a delta, whatever you want to call it, okay? This is the #1 most important variable, as without a target, the systems you set up are completely useless and there's confusion created in day-to-day, okay? The biggest confusion for me when I took over a team that was doing 2.7 million a month, that would go to 3.5, is I went in and I basically said, I asked all of the executive leadership, hey, what's our target? What's our revenue goal? The owner, the president, the CFO, and the COO gave me different answers. And I was like, hold up, this is problematic. You guys have to agree on what the target actually is. Because if there's no target, simply put, there can be alignment in what are the steps that are needed to be taken to actually reach a certain outcome. The first thing that you need to do is create a target, okay? Now, my suggestion is target, you should probably have like a yearly target, and then that would be reflected amongst like different monthly targets, but a yearly target is probably the best way to actually go about it, okay? Now, once you set a target, the second thing is reverse engineering the process. Reverse engineering the process, simply put, means that we have the target, which is the sales value, it's the end goal. And then we have the point of origin. And the point of origin usually in sales teams would be classified as the MQL. Like it basically be classified as the leads that's generated from marketing. Now, different people have different interpretations of MQLs. I just like to simplify it down to once a lead has been generated, now it's up to the sales team to take that lead through a certain pathway and bring it to the ultimate outcome, which is the sales value. So in this case, again, once the target is set, there has to be a full journey of all the data points between point of origin, again, MQL, and target accomplished, which is the sales value. So this is dependent on your acquisition channel and the relevant pathways, meaning that every single sales team will have a different way of going about things. An acquisition channel means where you're acquiring the leads from. It might be from organic, it might be from paid ads. It doesn't really matter, but different sales teams have different acquisition channels. And then the pathway is what sort of like the funnel or the pathway a lead goes through after being acquired from the acquisition channel, after being converted into a lead, right, an MQL, in order to become a sale, okay? So there's different ways to go about it. Some people do like an inbound triage to a sales call. Some people do a VSL to a sales call. It doesn't really matter, but you need to know exactly what is the acquisition channel, what is the pathway that's leading to the sales value, okay? You need to know. You probably know. You're the fucking business owner. You know what the pathway is, okay? But I'll give you an example of the 3.5 million a month company that I'm mentioning. The acquisition channels in this case was organic YouTube, organic Instagram, SLO. So we had like a self-liquidating offer from Meta and Google. So it was like Facebook and YouTube basically, and Instagram. And then existing client base. This was like for upsells, referrals, all of that good stuff. So These are the acquisition channels, and then the pathways were the following. Implementation call, which is an inbound triage call, which is where the majority of the leads were distributed to. Outbound triage, so outbound set call, basically the lead volume that was captured that didn't get directed to an inbound triage call. A DM triage, a website direct booking, and then a reactivation campaign and workflow. These were for upsells, and the website direct bookings, these were just purely organic. We didn't drive traffic to the website. People just went to the website and booked in themselves. So the origin to target pathway in this case, again, like if we reverse engineer the process, goes from like SLO paid and SLO organic. I'm simplifying it. Obviously, as I've said, we have more, but just simplified everything. SLO paid and SLO organic generates about 10,000 new leads every month. That was the case for us. And then they're distributed into these three channels: outbound SDRs, inbound SDRs, DM setters. Again, there's the website direct bookings and the reactivation. I just try to simplify it for you guys as much as possible in this case. Okay. So the goal was, once we do these will lead to 3.5 million. Okay. Now, after mapping out the origin to target pathway, then the next step is figuring out all the data points in each step of the pathway. This is super important because what most people do is they say, I'm going to identify data points, and then the only data points are close rate, show rate, average cash collection. Like, these are not enough to actually plan and forecast for a sales department. These are actually the most relevant metrics, right? They're not irrelevant, just like over exaggerating, but they're not as relevant as you think it is in isolation. Okay. So we need to identify all the data points in each step of the pathway. So in the above case, the distribution of 10,000 new leads to SDR departments was largely dependent from marketing. Okay. So the data points for sales departments come right after that, meaning that from here to here, the sales team wasn't responsible. It was the marketing that was responsible. So let's say, though, the outbound SDRs were given 4,000 new leads out of 10,000 leads available. Then their part of the delta of the target becomes 40% of total cash collection. That isn't always that doesn't, I'm just simplifying stuff, okay? It doesn't mean that exactly the portion of the leads has to contribute to exactly the portion of the cash collection. But just to simplify everything, let's say if the SDRs get 40% of the lead volume, then I expect them to produce 40% of the revenue. That isn't actually the case all the time, but let's say it is in this magical theoretical world, just to simplify everything. Okay. So in this case, that would represent 1.4 million in cash collection. So then for that SDR team that is responsible to hit 1.4 million, these are all the data points that they had. So it was contacts per lead, the pickup rate, the pickup to conversation rate, conversation to set, show, close, and the average ticket size. These were all the data points that we have to plan for the SDR team, okay? And I actually recently uploaded a case study for this specific outbound SDR team and how we took them from 90K collected to 400K collected in less than 90 days. I break down exactly the strategies that we use to optimize for each one of these data points. So you can watch that video. It actually breaks down everything as far as how you need to do things and how you need to work things out for an outbound SDR department. Here are all the data points. The final step here is to get your current averages, okay? Meaning the current average percentage for each data point with the way the department is running right now. So this is the pathway, this is the target, and then you also have to identify what are my current averages for each data point right here, okay? And you'll see why I need it, because the next step is to create a monthly growth / forecast model. What this means is that based on your current averages, you will need to create a forecast model for assumption numbers needed to hit a target, okay? Basically, it's like I have this target that I need to hit, and I have this position that I'm in right now. And I have all these averages. This is what we're hitting right now for this point. This is what we're hitting for this point. This is what we're hitting for this point. I need to create a forecast model for what each data point needs to be in order for me to get as a byproduct that target. Again, you need to remember that the cash collection goal you're going to hit is merely a byproduct of all these, some of the data points that happen throughout a pathway, a sales pathway. Okay, so again, you need to get your averages, and then that allows you to create a forecast model. Once you identify how on pace you are in terms of actuals relative to assumptions, you can then make a growth plan with the relevant speed you want to work with. Okay, so on pace means you need to identify how far away or close to the target you currently are at. Okay, so if I'm at this number and I want to hit this, then my pace is this based on how close I am in terms of proximity. Okay, pretty simple. The example above, okay, for the 3.5 million, we're actually at 2.7 and the target was 3.5. So in that case, we were 77% of the way there, right? Which is not bad at all. It's pretty close. The executive leadership of the company wanted fast growth, okay? And I knew historically that the VP of sales, director of sales position in the company had really high churn, Okay, so what I did is I set a 90-day window with approximately 8% growth monthly to meet those demands. Okay, because I was like, well, I know that they fucking fire people all the time and people leave all the time. So I'm like, in the period that I'm going to be there, because I sort of knew that I was going to leave pretty early on, I want to achieve the most amount of growth possible. Okay, so I projected for an 8% monthly growth to meet those demands, right? Which is pretty aggressive. So based on that forecast, the number looked like this. In March, the actual was 2.7, then in April, 2.95, then in May, 3.3, and then in June, 3.55. We achieved that by May. I have some data right here. Credibility check, bang, bang, 3.5 million in May 2026. After the current pace and growth forecast is determined, we then need to address the data points that will be used as a lever to produce growth. Again, why this is really important is because you're going to have all these data points and you're going to have the forecasted data points. And you're going to need to understand that if my team is closing really high, then close rate isn't a lever to pull. If my show rate is already really high, then show rate is not a lever to pull. So you need to identify based on the data points that you have, as far as actuals versus assumption, what are the levers that I can pull right now to make the most significant impact in terms of reaching my goal? And this is important not only for sales teams, but for sales reps as well. This is how you should strategize as a sales rep every single month to hit your targets. So that brings me to the 3 ways you can do that. So there's 3 ways that you can use to pull levers as far as data points to achieve certain growth. Okay. The first one is easy changes with little downside. Okay. These are the ones you will always make first. This is why they're first, because you will make them first. Easy changes with little downside. These are low effort changes you can make infrastructurally within the department to address a certain data point that are likely to produce increase without any diminishing returns. What that means is that if I am to implement this change, it will likely lead to a significant increase, but I also think that that significant increase will not come at the cost or the expense of something else. So that means that I should probably pull that lever as fast as possible because there's only high upside for me and no real downside. An example of this I'll give you, if your SDRs are setting 5 people a day, you have 3 SDRs, that's about 15 sets a day, right? 5 times 3. And let's say for set SDR team, their pickup to conversation rate is 70%, but their conversation to set rate is 35%, meaning they're getting past the opener, but once they get past the opener, they're not really booking enough people. Could be different reasons why, but I'm just looking at it from a data perspective. If the closing team has 30 slots per day and only gets 15 slots filled, that means there's a drop-off happening during the conversations that's causing the SDRs to not pull people in, even though the closing team has capacity for it. Could it possibly mean that those leads are DQ, financial disqualified, all of that stuff? It could, but the closing team has capacity for it. So instead of just saying no, I'd rather take those leads, fill my slots that are available, and even if they close at a significantly lower percentage than the team is closing at right now, that will still produce more than what I'm producing right now, because those slots are available and my SDR team is not booking enough after they get past the opener. Okay, so in this example, if each SDR increases their daily set count from 5 to 7, that's another 6 appointments per day, which even at a significantly lower close rate than the other sets, due to closing team being able to handle capacity and lead flow already exist, it will yield more cash collected per same lead volume / ad spend. Okay. Another example of this is lead routing. Not a lot of people do lead routing, which is stupid because this is one of the most effective methods that you can use. In this example, I'll explain what lead routing means. Is let's say closer A closes at 25% and has a 50% show rate, and closer B closes at 37% close rate and has a 55% show rate. Let's assume that both have 10 available slots a day and have 7 calls booked. Okay. It might surprise you, but a large number of businesses distribute the leads evenly to their sales team. They're like, oh, here's my 5 closers. Everyone get every lead, all the leads like this, okay? The likelihood is that if the leads though are routed in a way where closer B, the guy that closes 13% more, 12% more than the first guy, is always full first before anyone else, the likelihood is the excess of leads, which is 3 per day, would convert at a much higher rate. Meaning that if I have this guy on my team that is closing higher, he's going to be full at all times. And the other guys are also going to get leads, but they're not going to get leads at the pace that the top guy gets. Okay. So in this example, we'd be taking 3 bookings from closer A, which closes at 25% and shows at 50%. And we'd distribute them to closer B, who closes at 37% and 55% show rate. Over the course of a month, closer A would yield 7 to 8 total deals from those leads, whereas closer B would yield 12 to 13 without generating more leads. Again, I'm not spending more money on ads. I'm not generating more leads. I'm taking the leads that already exist and I'm saying, this guy converts them pretty well, but this guy converts them extremely well. So I'm going to give more to this guy that converts them extremely well because those leads exist within my ecosystem. So I just make those leads more effective. I have a higher revenue per lead, okay, essentially in this case. So again, this is this is what I define as easy changes that have a high impact with no downside, because we're not changing anything within the process. We're taking something that exists and we're just making it a little bit more effective by maybe distributing or directing it in a slightly different way. But I'm not changing infrastructurally something. Okay, the pathway is still the same. The pathway is exactly identical. So you're just making the pathway more effective. Now, the second change that you can make is similarly easy changes you can make that have a high impact, but they have a higher downside. Previously, the changes that I just outlined don't really have that much of a downside, right? They're easy to make, that have a high impact, but they don't really have a downside. The second type of change has a higher downside, okay? Similarly to the above, these are low effort changes that can be made infrastructurally, but with way higher downside. Booking more leads to empty slots or routing leads to a higher conversion sales rep provide almost no downside because you're not removing a part of the process. On the other hand, if you take away part of the process, there is potentially a high return, although low effort, but it can provide a high risk because removing a part of something that we know factually works at a certain extent. Okay, we're taking away part of the pathway. We're just cutting it off. An example of this is a business that I consulted with recently. They're doing like business coaching to gym owners. Okay, so their main pathway is a VSL model, right? So it's VSL to direct booking. And then they also have like VSL drop-off that the outbound sellers capture, meaning that people opt in, they watch the VSL, but they don't book in. So the drop-off of people that don't book in are captured by the SDRs and sent to the sales team. Okay. The direct bookings show at 35% and close at 20%. Outbound SDRs like show at 75% and close at 30%. Okay. Could be different reasons why. It might be the VSL is pretty shit. It might be that people can book in way too far advanced from the VSL. Doesn't matter. But what is an easy change to make here? Okay, the easy change to make here is to just cut the VSL off. Just let the outbound sellers do their thing. Because I can go in and fix the pathway and like make it more effective, or I can just simply distribute things into a different pathway. Okay, which I would predict has a higher return, although higher downside, because I'm taking away part of something that factually works and just completely removing it. Okay, a low effort change again that can be made here is completely removing the VSL. And get the SDRs to call all VSL lead bookings. It statistically makes more sense, although this change would likely be more successful. The risk is removing an existing part of the pathway rather than making a change within the pathway that has a higher risk. When I was at 7th level, I wanted to do this change. We had inbound sellers. Like it just wasn't a profitable model at the extent that we should have run it. So I wanted to take 80% of the inbound sellers, just remove them and distribute all those leads to the outbound team that we had. Because I mathematically predicted that would make more sense. The reason I didn't do that change is because I decided to make the easy, high impact, low downside changes first. This is where you need to have some discipline as a business owner or a sales manager and say, these are all the shit that I can do. I'm not going to do all of them. Okay, so the second type, these are stuff that can be very powerful and very impactful for a business, but you need to also have the discipline to see something and detect something and spot something and be like, this can be really powerful. Let me put it right here on the side. Let me make the easy changes that have a high impact and no downside. Let me assess how everything goes and then go into these changes that have high upside, but also have a higher risk. This is where discipline comes in place as a business or a sales manager. Most people don't have the discipline, so they fucking change everything at once, they ruin everything. And then they say it's the closer's fault because they don't know how to objection handle it, which is just fucking retarded. So the third change to make, these are the changes that most of the people do. It's impactful, but it's not instant a lot of times. So these are long-term changes and levers that you can pull. So these are changes basically that can be effective in overall production, but inevitably they take time to implement, not because you are lazy or slow in implementing it. It's because from the nature of the change, it takes time to develop. Meaning that if I get someone who's at 50% body fat and get him to 8, okay, there's an element of time that we have to accept that's going to be the case. So even though I can make all these impactful changes, getting him to go to the gym, reduce his calories, walk more, he's not going to lose all the body fat straight away. Okay, I still need to make those easy changes, but time takes time. Will take time to fucking lose the body fat. A good example of this is skill set and sales training. Although it pays dividends, to grow the close rate of a team from something like 32% to 35%, it is likely not going to happen within a 60-day window. Similarly, you won't be able to increase the average ticket size from 5.5 to 6K within 30 days. Should you implement strategies to increase those things? Of course, 100%. Sales training is super important. Should you have an expectation to use those as levers for immediate change within a sales team? Almost always no. Okay, there are cases where the sales team is complete garbage and you do need to like change the script, or you need to teach those people some objection handling. But like those cases are not as common as like a sales team that's doing 300, 400, 500 grand a month that is closing at a decent percentage, and you have all these other changes that could be made first. You can still put a process in place to hit those outcomes over time, knowing they'll have a greater compounding effect to the other changes you're making over time, but you shouldn't expect them to make an instant increase. So the good thing about sales training and all these long-term changes is that as I'm pulling levers 1 and 2, so immediate changes that have a high impact, whether it's no downside or higher downside, I am still implementing sales training in between. I'm still implementing things like skill set, scripting, objection handling, role-playing, call reviewing, right? I'm still doing all those things. And what that means is as I'm doing this exponential increase from things like 300 to 600K a month, I'm also compounding my growth through my team's effectiveness on the phones, which will mean that 600 will now be 700 without the other changes taking place. But it's a much like, I'd rather go from 3 to 600 and 6 to 7 from those long-term changes rather than just go from like 3 to 400 and just stay at 400, because I've never implemented changes 1 and 2. And on my last video, again, I'm putting this up again. You can go watch it about the outbound SDR team. It was still a change that we had to do. We still had to do a lot of QCing and had to do directed training. It wasn't the main lever that we had to pull, but it was still a lever that we had to pull that still increased the team's effectiveness over a 90-day window. The final thing is having a recruitment and hiring plan based on forecasted schedule to close. Okay, you will now have a set number of schedule availability you need. Okay, what that means is that if our theoretical target of 3.5 billion a month, we need 1,500 slots per month at the estimated slot utilization percentage, we need to recruit accordingly so we have that slot availability for inbound call at all times. What that simply put means is that when you do a forecast, when you go and watch this video and you're like, oh, this makes sense, instead of just investing into sales training, I should actually probably do a forecast for my sales team. And you do a forecast, you're then going to go and see, I am here, I need to be here. The there that I'm trying to get to reflects a certain amount of sales calls that need to be booked. How many slots do I have available right now? Shit, not enough. So I need to increase sales slots at that given time of the year. So that probably means that I need to set up some sort of recruiting or hiring plan to be able to have enough slots available to fill in my closures at that given time when I have that amount of sales calls to be booked. Again, the way to come up with that number is to take the total number of scheduled calls forecasted to hit and aim for that to be 80 to 85% of full capacity, meaning that if my forecast says that for me to hit X goal, I need to have 85 bookings, then that means we need to hire for 100 available slots. Now, I'm going to tell you some guru shit right now. Why not 100%? Why 85%? I've noticed that at 100% slot utilization, things just don't work out that well for some reason. I don't know if that's just because the sales team can't really handle back-to-back calls. So I prefer them to be 85% full instead of 100% full. That just tends to play out a lot better because the sales team some breathing room. It's a little bit more predictable. We need to also account for things like promotions and progressions, ramp-ups, and peeps/fires. Okay, to account for these, I like to build out a revolving hiring or progression model where the top part of the team is established and gets priority. The middle part is partially proven and why they'll be moving into the high priority or the PEEP. And then I also have a PEEP part, okay? And you see right here, the top 25% is established, middle is like partially established, meaning they're within KPIs and they're performing consistently, but they haven't over exceeded to the point where they're like top priority. They're my top guys. And then the bottom are people who are underperforming, so they're on a PEEP, okay? And the great thing about this model is that it's constantly evolving. So people from the middle tier can go to the top tier, from the top can go to the middle, people from the bottom can go to the middle, vice versa, so on and so forth. And you can always plug new hires, which I have a full document on how you do new hires. So if you want that document, just message me, I'll send it to you. No opt-in, no lead magnet, I'll just fucking send it to you. I don't care, okay? But once you get a new hire and you ramp up that new hire, they then are plugged into this ecosystem, and then you have the revolving progression plan at all times, okay? It is really, really important to do because you don't want to overhire or underhire. You want to have the right amount of people at all times. That's pretty much it. So to put everything into like a summarization, have a target, reverse engineer the process to hit that target, forecast current versus assumptions, like what I want to hit, and then identify the levers to pull for your team to actually lead to that growth based on the 3 types of changes. And then also create a recruitment plan in the meantime, so you can actually know how many people you need to have on your sales team at any given time to actually make that model feasible, because you can have all the spreadsheets in the world, but if you don't have enough people, it doesn't really matter. Okay, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I will speak to you all soon. So yeah.